Hello, everyone. My name is Vinayak, and I'm the founder and CEO at Drafted. Really excited to be part of the Arc Remote Career Fair Summit. And big thanks to the Arc team for putting this on. And thanks also to my team at Drafted for helping me put this together for you. Just to make sure that the chat works, can I get a volunteer to type something into the chat and just say hello? All right. Hello, Kenneth, Ilyana, and Simran. Hopefully I'm saying your names correctly. Hi, Prosper. So today I wanted to talk about a little bit about how job searches used to work, what has changed because of recent events like COVID-19, and what hasn't changed. And I'll also be telling you a little bit about how we think about the job search at Drafted and how that can help you in terms of looking for your next gig, if that's what you're doing. So just a quick pointer, if you want to check out what we're about, you can go to drafted.us. You can find me on Twitter at pseudovirtual. And just to give you a little bit of background about the company, hi Gaurav. We've been working on network recruiting products and introductions as a way to get jobs for almost 5 years now. We're based in Boston, Massachusetts. And before this, I used to work at Kayak, the travel search company, where I was the director of engineering. And when I was there, I did a lot of hiring, not just for engineers, but across all functions for the company. And before I was at Kayak, I went through my first grueling job search myself. And so one of the things I realized at Kayak is that the way that a lot of the best companies hire is often through introductions and not just by looking at resumes that are submitted through a careers page. I would imagine that almost every single person here has asked their friends and have tried to network their way into new opportunities at some point in their life. You've probably helped some of your friends get new opportunities by making introductions for them. And I mean, that's the reality that we live in, right? Introductions typically beat resumes. Hi, Rachel. Hi, Gaurav. So the reality is that 85% of all people that ever look for a job use their networks, right? And we all know this. A lot of us are using LinkedIn or Facebook or other networking tools to get new connections and find jobs. This is not new. One of the things that is interesting is that almost all employers also agree that referrals are one of the best ways to hire. And that's a little bit odd because most employers don't provide a great way for job seekers to get those referrals. They have their internal referral programs, but that's not very useful to you unless you already have a friend at the company. And just to underscore how important this is, every one of us knows this intuitively, and we've seen this anecdotally, or we've had personal experiences that teach us this, but the data agrees with it too. If you're able to get an introduction through a personal relationship to a company that you want to work at, then that can increase your chances of getting hired by a factor of 7. What that means is that if there's 100 applicants and they're going to accept 1 out of 100, your chances of being that one person go up by literally a factor of 7, which means that anyone that's getting an introduction has a leg up over you if you're not getting one. And you can see this in the data from the top companies too. Facebook and Google, this data is maybe a couple of years old now, but Facebook and Google hire almost 60% of their non-college grad hires through referrals. And it's not just in tech. It also happens at the big accounting firms. It happens at the big finance firms. And you can see this trickle down all the way to the smallest startups in any given industry. And overall, 30% of all hires across the board happen through referrals. Now, the way that companies make these jobs accessible to us is very different, right? They say, oh yeah, it's like, we're hiring, apply via our careers page. We have a ton of openings for you to look at. And then you have to do a lot of work, right? You have to worry about crafting your resume. You have to make it perfect. You have to make your LinkedIn profile perfect. You have to have a project portfolio that's perfect. You have to write a cover letter, or in these cases, a cover email. And if you even have like one typo in any of these things, that might entirely color how how people perceive you. And it's a ton of work, and you put a lot of time into it. You have to get feedback from your friends and your family and your advisors. And a lot of times you're not going to get feedback about why you were rejected at all. Like they might just say like, this is not a fit at this time or whatever. And that's not very valuable for you. Sometimes you won't even hear back, or it's just going to be some kind of automated email. And this is how we actually get jobs, right? We don't actually get the job usually by applying through the careers page, right? We ask our friends and we say, hey, where are you working? Wow, Luke just shared something that was crazy. 500 places and ghosted by a lot of people. Yeah, I mean that's just insane, and it shouldn't happen. How we actually get jobs is when we have a friend that works at the company, and our friend really vouches for us, and the company happens to be hiring for someone that's in your skill set. And the other way we discover companies, we typically don't. Our first thought when we're thinking about a new opportunity isn't to open a browser and go to Indeed.com and type in product manager or marketing associate, because if we did that, we would just get literally hundreds of thousands of job postings, and then it's not really that useful because it doesn't help you narrow down the field of companies or opportunities, and it's really hard for you to figure out what's the right fit for me. There might be some other career coaching or mentoring services. A lot of them charge fees, and if you don't have a job, then you don't really want to pay a fee. And so you typically discover a lot of companies through your community, right? Maybe it's your college alumni network, maybe it's your high school alumni network, maybe it's just a friend that that happens to be like the most connected person that every friend group has a couple of people that are more connected than the rest, and a lot of times we rely on those people to help us get connected to the right folks. I like Eric's comment about saying it's so much fun to interview at a company and not hear anything again. Yeah, and it totally sucks. One of the things that has happened with COVID-19 is that this problem has been kind of compounded, because now it's not just that you apply and you don't hear back. Some of the jobs you're applying for don't even exist anymore, and the company just didn't bother to take them down. And the reason they didn't bother to take them down is because they actually fired their recruiting team. So the people who are in charge of managing those job posts and keeping them up to date don't work there anymore. And so you might be applying into jobs that literally don't exist because they haven't been updated, which is even worse. And the other thing that COVID has impacted is that serendipitous networking has become much harder. You don't meet as many people at parties anymore. You don't run into people really easily. You have to be super intentional about it, and you're not really necessarily sure where to go and look for these people. I mean, so these kinds of virtual career fairs and these kinds of virtual events is a great start to that. So thanks again to the Arc team for leading the charge on this. Last but not least, I just want to take a moment to address the fact that underrepresented groups and people from underserved communities still have an extra hard time, not just because of systemic bias, but also because a lot of companies tend to focus even the companies that are trying their hardest to have a more diverse set of people in their company tend to focus on pipeline and not necessarily on fixing the real root cause, which is that every person has inherent bias, and you have to put in processes and systems in place to counteract that, and you have to educate the people in your own organization how to recruit better. And just because a company CEO puts on their blog or makes a news announcement saying we're committed to diversity doesn't mean that it's automatically going to fix it. It's going to take a while. Even if the companies are trying their level best, it's going to take a while because it fundamentally needs all the individuals in the company to change. And if you want to change a 1,000-person company, you need each of those 1,000 people to actually undergo a personal growth change. And you can't do that overnight, even if they all really want to do it. One thing that hasn't changed is that a single recommendation from the right person at the right time can entirely change the game for you. Shout out if you've ever gotten an interview just because your friend introduced you without having to go through a really, really long application process. Or if you were able to make a connection for someone where they got the interview because you introduced them. There you go, right? And what are the chances you think you would have of getting that same interview if you had applied on the careers page but didn't have any friends at the company, right? It really, really matters. So the question is, if you're doing a new job search, what's the best way to do it? What's the best tool to use? What's the best strategy? And I believe, and our entire company is founded on this one belief, that the best way to get a job is, instead of focusing on getting the job, focus on getting that recommendation. And Eric says he got an introduction to a job that didn't even exist on the careers page. That's crazy. Great question, Alice, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. So in order to get the best recommendations to the best companies, we have to think about it in almost the opposite way, which is, when do people at companies make referrals to their company? They do it when it's easy and it's fast and it feels good. Most people don't wake up in the morning and think, hey, today I want to go to the office and refer some friends for jobs, right? The average employee at the average company does not think that way. Most of us do not think that way, right? How many of you wake up in the morning and think, like, what introductions can I make today for my friends? You don't, right? You only think about it when your friend asks you for help, right? They come to you and say something like, hey, I'm looking for jobs. I was most recently a software engineer at XYZ company, or I was most recently a customer success representative at this company, and we just went through layoffs. So can you help me out? And most of the time, if someone came to me and said that, and I was really motivated to help them, I would still say, like, well, I mean, there's maybe 50 friends in my network that are all working in different companies. Probably one of their companies is hiring for someone like you, but I don't really know who those people are, and I don't know them off the top of my head. And so it's not easy or fast for me to do it, even though I might feel good about it. So here's a super tactical example to kind of help you understand how to make it easy. So if you're asking for a referral and you say, you go and ask someone like, hey, do you know someone that's looking for a project manager? That's a difficult request for me because I probably do know some people that are looking for a project manager, but it's a lot of work for me to go and figure out who those people are if I don't immediately think of someone off the top of my head. So if you did the research and said, hey, I see that there's a job opening at this company that I think is awesome for me, and I see that you're connected to some people there, maybe on LinkedIn or Facebook or some other way, would you be able to put in a good word, and would you be able to do something for me? That's much easier for me to understand, because now I know what you're looking for, and I have a very, very clear, actionable item from you that I can do immediately. The other thing is, especially for your most connected friends or your mentors or your advisors, or maybe your former bosses, they might be getting many requests like this, especially right now. And so if it's fast for me to take action in the moment, I'm going to do it immediately. If it's not fast, I still want to help you, but I might not do it the same day. I might take a few days to do it, and that's going to hurt you. So instead of maybe saying, hey, can you introduce me to this person at Shopify, or can you make a referral for me? Instead, you can say, hey, here's a quick summary of me, here's my resume, and here's the person that you need to get in touch with, and here's their email. And if you can do that, that would be like amazing. Then it's really easy for me to click forward in my email inbox and just send the message along without lifting a single finger. At the end, one of the things that most of the people that are making referrals for you are going to really appreciate is really thoughtful gratitude. So instead of just saying, hey, thanks for helping me out, tell them how they're impacting your life. Make them feel good for how, for what they've done for you. Like, really underscore that what's really easy for them, which is, submitting one web form or forwarding your email to someone else, like something that takes them 2 seconds could be a life-changing thing for you. And it's giving you a 10x improvement over what you're currently going through. And a lot of times that is almost lost on the people that are making the referral. They don't necessarily understand how valuable what they're doing is for you. And so reminding them about how much value they're providing is a great way to get them to want to provide even more value, right? If I come to you and I say, hey, thanks for doing that job, versus if I come to you and say, hey, I really appreciated the way and the time and the care and the thought that you put into this, for these 3 reasons, and this is the impact that it had for me because you did this work, and I really appreciate it. That's a very different kind of gratitude that you're showing. So now I'm going to spend a few minutes telling you about how Drafted comes into that and how we think about that and what we're doing to help everyone get jobs in this way. Internal employee referral systems are usually relegated to the company's internal HR or applicant tracking system, right? And it doesn't really empower us as job seekers or individuals to do much about it unless you're actually working at the company. But the reality is that 40% of all introductions happen from non-employees. So just take a minute to let that sink in. 40% of all of the introductions that lead to interviews and hires do not come through employees of the company. They come from the people around the company, the community, the people that are familiar with the company. It's a friend's friend. It's not the person that works there. And so this is what we try to help with at Drafted. The Drafted network helps you get more recommendations and lets you take a single recommendation and have that carry you much further than what it would in normal life. So you can go to Drafted, you can look at the jobs that are open, and we only have direct posted jobs by recruiters. So we don't aggregate other job boards. Like every single job on Drafted will be a real job that's posted by a real person who is actually a signed up user on the platform, and will actually show you who that user is. So if they don't reply to a job post, you can literally go track them down on LinkedIn and be like, hey, you didn't reply to my job post. And we let you create a profile that focuses on your recommendations instead of focusing on your resume. And those recommendations are written by people in your community who oftentimes might have a slightly higher profile than you within the community, right? So maybe it's an employee at the company you want to work at. Maybe it's a mentor or an advisor that has some more credentials. And that way you can have the credibility of the people around you who are trying to help you, elevate you in front of companies that are trying to hire before they even talk to you. Usually reference checks like that are like a last thought in the company hiring process, where it's like after you check all the boxes and you and you go through the whole interview process, that's when they say like, oh, can you give me a reference? But at that point, it's a formality. All they're going to check is that you're not an axe murderer, and then that's pretty much it. But by that time, you've already done all the hard work. Getting that reference didn't necessarily solve the initial point of getting you in the door. And so what we're trying to do is helping you take those references and leverage them at the beginning of the process instead of having them be a formality at the end. So here's an example of a person who I recently talked to who got a job through Drafted, and her name is Bhavya, and she works in New York, and she got laid off from her job, and within a day of signing up for Drafted, she got a bunch of introductions to great companies because the recruiters on the platform actually saw the recommendations that people were making about her, and they were impressed just based on the recommendations. So they reached her and they had a contact with her, allowing her to showcase at the front end of the process who she was instead of just what the paper said. So I'm not going to go into too much of the detail on the product. You can go and try. You can go and sign up for it. You can try it out. It's free. There's no obligations. There's no strings. And the way that it works is that you can sign up on Drafted. You can get a recommendation from one of your friends or one of your mentors or one of your advisors. I would recommend that you should get, you should get maybe your former boss or your former mentor to vouch for you, or maybe your advisor or someone like that. so now I'm going to dive in to some questions, because this time is for you, and I want to make sure that I can give as much help as possible. So I'm not going to focus too much on other things, except for kind of being part of the conversation and answering your questions. So I have a question from Morgan Smith saying, can LinkedIn recommendations be migrated over? The answer is unfortunately no, because LinkedIn does not allow that. They keep their data in their walled garden, and so they don't let they don't let the small folks like us get that. But what I will say is that one of the things that's important in your recommendations that often happens in LinkedIn recommendations is that LinkedIn recommendations often turn into, like, I'm only going to say good things about this person because it's like so super public. But think about a recommendation in context of the job that you're looking for, right? So if you're looking to move from, let's say, a senior marketer to a director of marketing position in your job search, then the recommendation that you want is going to be from someone that is maybe already a director of marketing and who's talking about you as if you were a director of marketing. And you can actually ask them for an in-context recommendation like that. I have a question from Megan asking, how closely do hiring managers vet candidates by the preferred years of experience? Good question. So I would say that it's almost never something that's a deal breaker within certain bounds. So for example, if the position says like 10 years of experience and you have one, then that might be too far away. But if the position says like 3 to 5 years experience and you only have 2 years of experience, but you're really good, then the company will not care. In most cases, because I mean, think about the hiring manager for a minute, right? The hiring manager, they want to hire someone who is great, someone who's going to reduce the amount of work that they have to do, and someone that is going to be additive to their team. If they think that you can do those three things, then everything else kind of melts away. And so what a recommendation on the way in does, and making sure that they read the recommendation before they read your application, that sets the context for them, because these are things that are really difficult to communicate in a resume or in an application, but they are very easy to communicate in the recommendation from your mentor. What percentage of job posts are sponsoring visa or remote candidates? That is a good question. So we just launched a way for companies to specify whether they're doing that or not. And so I haven't checked the most recent numbers, but I think maybe there's 10% of the companies on the platform, last I checked, that had at least one job post where they were open to sponsoring visas. Companies do specify whether it's like a remote position or not. And at least in the information and knowledge workers world, most companies are supporting some kind of remote option at this point, especially all the big ones. So I think you're in good luck on Drafted if you're looking for remote positions. For the visa ones, we literally launched that last week because we've been building a lot of new features, especially since COVID. And we're also actually partnering with a company called Bridge that helps companies figure out easier ways to transfer visas and help with the immigration process and things like that. So you can Google like the Bridge Next Act program to learn more about that, or kind of check if the company you're applying to is part of that, because that means that they're definitely going to be able to support it. Does asking for a nomination require the person nominating to create an account on Drafted? The short answer is kind of, in the sense that we make them put in an email and verify their email and verify who they are. So that's kind of like an account creation, because otherwise you would get like Russian spam bots referring Russian spam bots, and you don't want that. And so to the extent that we require them to kind of verify who they are and give enough information where we can, and give us consent to show their recommendation to the employer, the answer is yes. But beyond that, they don't have to do much else. What about a newly graduated entry level that says you need 2 years of experience? So for the entry level, yes, I think the entry level one is a bit tricky, because I think that the 2 years of experience is a crutch that people use in job posts when they want to essentially say, we don't want someone who needs to learn a lot of stuff before being productive. Like, that's their way of saying that. The actual years isn't necessarily that important. It just so happens that typically 2 years into your career, you're kind of at that point where you can hit the ground running somewhere. And so I think that if you can demonstrate very strongly that you can hit the ground running in like whatever stack that company is using for their technology and whatever process they're using, or maybe, maybe you were an MBA student and before your MBA you had some work experience and now you're just getting out of your MBA. I think in those types of cases, you can absolutely, kind of take a chance and apply to those. I mean, in general, you should almost always err on the side of applying. And then the best thing to do is, in combination with that, get a referral either through an employee of the company or simply get literally anyone who knows you and knows someone at the company to forward an email from you to that company. That is a highly, highly effective way that really shouldn't work as well as it does, but that's the world we live in, and so we should make the most of it. And we kind of try to short circuit that process with the nominations part in Drafted. Let's see. If I've had extended interactions with a recruiter to find a good fit, and they ultimately transfer me to another recruiter that owns the role, who would the first recruiter be in a place to provide me with a referral? And the short answer is no, because that referral would count about as much as that transfer that they did. But what's going to happen behind the scenes is that when they do the transfer, the second recruiter is going to ask them like, yo, is this candidate any good? And what that recruiter says in that moment is going to serve as, the juice that normally comes out of your referral. So make sure that even if that happens, your first interactions with that first recruiter go really well, because the fact that they're even sending you to another recruiter instead of just rejecting you is a good sign, because it means that they like you, but for whatever reason, they don't think it's quite the right fit. And so I think that's still overall a positive sign. How many job seekers are in the senior level category? That is a good question. And the answer is that you are not alone. You are among a lot of people who are in this category. And one of the sad parts is that we still have bias in our industry, especially in tech, especially in engineering, where people with too much experience for some reason have bias against them, because sometimes I would say younger companies tend to think that, oh, if you have a lot of experience and you're coming out of a really big company and if they see you as a lifer, then they're going to think that like, oh, can this person adapt to our process really quickly? Can this person learn all the new technology that we need really quickly? How often does this person learn new things? And so I think if you can find a way to counteract those types of built-in biases that these people are going to have about you, then that will be really valuable. So for example, actually at Drafted a couple of years ago, our engineering team is relatively young in the sense that age-wise, and we hired someone that was about 20 years older than all of our other developers. And when we interviewed him, we loved him because he came in and he said, "You're using this, this, and this, and I've been hacking around in those 3 technologies on the side for the last like 3 months because I was bored of my old company technology that my old company was using. And so I would love nothing more than to come to a new company and start exercising these new muscles that I've been building." And that was one of the things that was really impressive to us about him. And so I would definitely try to showcase, I would try to showcase the ability to kind of stay ahead of the curve and learn really quickly, because ultimately those are the things that people are secretly worried about when they stop considering you because you have a lot of experience. And I think it's kind of dumb personally that they do that, but that is the world that you're in. So the best way to counteract that, I would say, is to kind of get in front of it and say, look, it's like, I've been in the industry for 20 years, which means that I have a lot of wisdom to bring, but also I've learned like these 5 new things in the last few months alone, and I'm really excited to bring all these new skill sets to your company. That's funny from David. Let's see. Megan asks, is it better to get a referral before applying to the role, it seems that some companies handle referrals in a different channel than other applicants. Short answer, yes, absolutely. Always get referrals basically always win in the queue. Like a lot of companies will actually have a priority system internally where referrals go to the top of their inbox and applicants come second. And the reason actually isn't because they inherently believe that all referrals are better somehow, because like the quality should be roughly evenly distributed. The reason is because if they don't follow up on referrals, then the employees that are making those referrals are going to get upset that their referrals weren't followed up on, especially because a lot of times the company might have a referral bonus and the employee really wants a referral bonus. And so they keep haranguing the recruiters being like, hey, did you follow up my referral yet? Did you follow up with my referral yet? And so simply one of the reasons why you're going to get a faster response is because the recruiter doesn't want to have to deal with someone else inside the company complaining that they didn't do their job. Is referrals the only way to get your first job out of boot camp? No. I would say that if you're coming out of a boot camp, then honestly, and this might not be what you want to hear, but I would seriously consider working for free if you come out of a boot camp for a little while and offering that upfront, and especially to small startups who are all strapped for cash, and they try to find the companies that are willing to trade, that make trades that are valuable for both you and them, right? So, and I understand like not getting paid for a job is maybe not what you're looking for, but I do think that if you can figure out a way where you can, like, think about it this way: if you do a job search and it takes you 2 months to get a paying job, instead of that, if you have an alternative where you work for free for someone for 2 months and then you get the same job at the end, then what's really the difference? So Katie, I believe, I hope that's the correct way to pronounce your name, says, I heard that working for free is bad because it devalues the work of designers. Maybe volunteering or working for a nonprofit is good. I think volunteering or working for a nonprofit is good, but I actually don't think necessarily that working for free is bad if you do it in the right way. I think working for free is bad if it's happening during the interview process and they're using the interview process as a way to get free work. But that's different than you going to the company and proactively saying, hey, I know that I'm coming out of a boot camp, or I know that I'm coming out of a background that you may not normally think is in the top tier of your applications. However, I want to prove to you that you're wrong and that I can actually do a fantastic job. So all I want is for you to give me, a 2-month opportunity where I will literally work for free until you say that this work is valuable. And I'll do that for the first 4 to 6 weeks for completely free, consider an unpaid internship. And all I ask is that you teach me how to be better and you teach me what you're doing, and I'll do whatever you want. I'll take out the trash, I will mop the floor, and I'll write some code. And I'll tell you why I believe so strongly in this. And the reason is because you might say like, oh, well, it's easy for you to say, you never had to do that. And and I actually still do that even today. So for me, maybe the version of this is that I want to work with other startups, and so I might say like, hey, I'm willing to spend 5 hours a week on your startup doing whatever you want. I don't want any compensation or equity or cash in return. And if we do this for a month, and you decide that you want me to work with you long time in a consulting capacity, then we can do it. If not, I will learn something new about your business, and I'll get a new perspective, and that's valuable to me too. And that strategy worked for me. The same strategy that worked for me when I was doing my job search worked for me again when I was trying to become, when I was trying to get my first, consulting and advisory gigs with other companies too. So, offering a chance to prove yourself for free, never a bad strategy. What can I do about stereotyping in the industry? I find it a gig because I'm in Nigeria when I clearly am qualified. So first, it really sucks that that is true, and I'm personally really sad about that. One of the things that you can definitely do is is potentially go deeper into the companies that you're really excited about. And so, for example, instead of applying, one of the things you could do, especially if you're in engineering or design, and you see that, oh, hey, let's say like Shopify is hiring, you could take one of their existing marketing pages and make a better design for it and send it to them, saying like, hey, I figured out a way, I had some ideas about how to make the design for your website better. Here you go. By the way, I'm also looking for a job. And if that doesn't get you at least a response, I'd be shocked. Or if you're an engineer and maybe the company has some open source projects, you can figure out a way to contribute to those, or at least submit some bug reports, and get in front of them, get their attention, develop credibility. Because sometimes, especially if you're applying from a place where the company's not used to hiring from, one of the things that companies that hire tend to fall into is this pattern of is this kind of like cycle of positive feedback. Like you hire one good person from, let's say, Harvard, and then you're like, okay, all good people must come from Harvard. And then, but you've never hired a good person from Nigeria, so you don't yet think all good people must come from Nigeria. I know companies that have hired like one person in a really far away place that they'd never been to before. Like a Kayak, we hired a couple of people for the first time in Kaunas in Lithuania, and we knew nothing about that region or the people, and we kind of took a chance, and they turned out to be really amazing. And so we're like, man, it's like there must be if these people are amazing, there must be a lot of other great people in Kaunas in Lithuania. So let's go hire a shit ton of people in Kaunas, Lithuania. So that's what we did, and it worked out really well. And Kayak, since then has had a 50 or 60% office there. Kayak actually opened an office there. So I think it's just about breaking the first, it's just about the first crack in the dam. And I think that it's definitely possible to showcase yourself in those ways. If you can do those things and you can get a referral, even better. And the cherry on top would be if you kind of did a small project like that, like redesigning someone's marketing page and sending it to them, but you actually have a friend who works at the company send it over as if it's a referral. But instead of saying like, my friend's looking for a job, here's his resume, or here's your resume, they can say, my friend actually did this amazing thing that I think is valuable for our company. Here's what she did. Here's her profile. Maybe we want to hire her or give her a job. So those are some things. Let's see. You mentioned stale job postings earlier. Does Drafted keep track of those on the listings? Short answer is yes. So the stale job postings all start going to the bottom, and stale being, we actually measure whether a job is stale or not based on how often the recruiter who's in charge of that job is coming to Drafted and checking anything. Because if they're not using Drafted, then it's not useful for the job seeker to be on Drafted, right? And so we essentially measure the staleness of jobs by the staleness of the people that are posting them, because that's almost more important. Because no person who's actively hiring wants to get random candidates for jobs that they're not hiring for. So typically, what we see is that when we kind of enforce it in the way where we keep the recruiters active, then it automatically ends up enforcing the way in which to keep the jobs active, if that makes sense. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to scroll through to see if there's any questions I missed. How are we doing? How are we doing so far? Any other questions about referrals or introductions, or how to leverage those? Oh, here we go. We have another question. What are the resume big words that stand out? So I'm going to be very honest, and I've never really figured this out. And the reason is because it seems like most companies have different things that they like here. So there's no, as far as I know, there's not really like a one size fits all keyword farm that you can put into your resume. But what I would say is that you can figure out what each company cares about if you really dive deep into what they're building and how they're building it. Like a lot of companies will have, especially the big ones, will have engineering blogs, or they'll talk about internal culture and structure and projects of their team. Or you might be able to find presentations that people from that company have done on YouTube about things that they worked on. Like maybe if it's a mobile app developer, maybe they've presented their mobile app at a bunch of pitch competitions when they were a young company. And if you go and check those things out, you can kind of figure out what they care about and what they're about. And you can go and figure out what are the keywords that are going to get their attention. I mean, I understand that this is also like time consuming, but I think that's why it's important to focus your job search on a smaller number of companies, because then you can go deep and maximize your chances of getting in. Any way to connect with the people who have already got a similar job Undrafted? That is not something you can do today, but that is probably one of the best feature ideas that I've heard for Drafted from job seekers. So thank you for that, Gaurav. And I'm going to actually write that down and talk to my product team about it tomorrow. From the hiring side, where does Drafted stack up to other channels used like LinkedIn? So one way to think about it is that it doesn't really stack up, in the sense that we're a much smaller platform, and that comes with some good and some bad. So the good part about that is a lot of times early platforms tend to get a lot more activity and traction than the kind of big old platforms, because you usually get people on both sides, both job seekers and recruiters, who are in an early adopter innovation mindset that will try out new tools. And so there's automatically this kind of weird effect where if you meet someone who's also using something that's relatively new, you already have an instant point of connection, because it just feels new and different, even if some parts of it might be similar. We're obviously not as big as LinkedIn, and we definitely don't have 600 million members. So from that perspective, there's definitely less people there. But what we hope is that the connections are more valuable and more relevant, and you actually hear back from people. And that's kind of the thing that we really focus on. So we focus on making sure that the job postings are up to date. We focus on making sure that every single candidate can have at least a couple opportunities within the first week of using Drafted. And we're focusing on making sure that candidates get to showcase themselves in a way that is unique and different than what they would normally do on LinkedIn or others. And we actually let you link to your LinkedIn profile in Drafted. So we're not trying to give you a new way to have a professional profile. We're just trying to get you some introductions. Question from Claire: how do you manage having keywords or pass the ATS when you've done a big career change? So I think that the stories about ATSs determining a lot of things based on keywords are a little bit overblown. So I think that one of the ways is to write from the heart, because someone, sooner or later in the process, someone is going to read whatever you write. And if that speaks to that person who's reading it, then that will absolutely make a difference. If the job description has a bunch of keywords in it, and you think that the company is using some kind of applicant tracking system that's looking for keywords related to that job description, every single AI that does keyword matching works almost exactly the same way. They analyze job descriptions, and they look at keywords in there, and they analyze the words in your resume, and they see if they're roughly in the same ballpark. So a very easy way to game the system is to submit something that just repeats the keywords that are already in the job description for each job. But they're going to be different, right? So there's no there's no one size fits all solution. You just got to do it for each job and each company, because every job description of every company is going to be a little bit different. Hopefully that's helpful. But if I was trying to game the system and simply just like pass the ATS so that I can actually get to a real conversation, that's what I would do. I wonder if there's some enterprising engineers that want to make an open source generator that can just where you can just put in keywords and it customizes your resume for those keywords to pass that ATS, to make a simple tool for everyone else to be able to apply to 100 jobs with the same resume and just add the keywords. That'd be pretty sweet. That's a good idea. See, like already 2 great ideas from this conversation. So I think this concept of having virtual interactions with a lot of people is definitely working a lot for me. Okay, Cindy says, some of the companies only offer college or graduate students for their internship. What would you recommend for bootcamp students to get the internship with those companies? So yeah, you're right that some companies will have kind of a specific partnership with a local college and university sometimes, and they'll say that their internships are only available to students. And I think that you'll find that smaller companies will be much more flexible on this than the bigger companies. So in a lot of cases, like the things that you're saying tend to be inflexible at the Googles and Amazons of the world, because they are all beholden by really bureaucratic compliance policies that are there for other reasons that might be good. And these are kind of like side effects that prevent the people inside the company from doing good stuff. Typically, growth stage companies that are maybe just like pre-IPO, but are maybe 5 or 6 years into their growth, are good companies to target for this kind of internship, because those companies will care more about, can I hire some really strong people that could turn into full-time hires via my internship program? That's what they're thinking. And so if you're one of those people, my guess is that you'll have better luck there trying to get them to bend the rules. Let's see. I'm gonna take a sip of water because I feel like I've been talking nonstop. And I think we're almost out of time, but I'm not quite sure. So I want to do a quick time check with the organizers. If one of you can ping me and tell me if I'm okay on time. All right, I think we can maybe still keep going for a few minutes. Let's see. I'm still scrolling through questions. Yeah, Tracy, we were just talking about that. Maybe when you had stepped away, about the idea of just making a generator where you can just add the extra keywords to your resume at the end. Luke asks, I'm so confused as to what to put on the EEO forms when it comes to my race. Usually my choices are so that used to happen to me, but it doesn't happen anymore because I'm originally from India. So I'm technically South Asian, and there didn't used to be an option for that. And it was just all Asian. And in parentheses, Asian often said, Chinese or Korean. This was like in the old school EEO forms. They've definitely updated that since then. And so a lot of times I would just leave it blank, or I would like literally randomly choose something. But I would, I'm not sure what the right thing is to do there. If I were you, I would try to go with the option that you believe will maximize your chances for getting the job, and be very unapologetic about it. Oh, here's a question from Megan. Megan's really crushing it with the questions today. A lot of great questions. As a software engineer, how can I have a portfolio when most of my work is a company's proprietary information? Fantastic question. And you might not like this answer, but I think the answer is that you have to do something outside of work if you want that. And maybe it's contributing to open source projects. Maybe it's tinkering on something in your spare time. Like for example, you could build this thing that would take in a resume and put some keywords on it. Be a really simple tool, but it'd be a really fun and cool project. Might get popular, and that could be your portfolio project. So maybe you can find some other people in here to work on that project with you, and you can open source it, and then you'll all get featured somewhere. I would definitely promote it if a team of people who comes together during this conference call would want to try it out, and I'm happy to help with anything that you want on that front for sure. You have my email, so if anyone here is really motivated to build that, and wants to try it out. And if I can be a guide or of help in any way, let me know. Let's see. Eric says, applying online has worked for me, but only due to my specialized experience in Dodd-Frank compliance. I usually get interviews for that when I just apply in line, but not for anything else. That makes sense, and I'm guessing it's because there's not a lot of people who are also applying to the jobs that you're applying to that have that specialized experience. So, but Eric makes a very good point, which is that if you can point to something that the company really needs, then that's going to get you the interview, regardless of what else is happening. And the key part about what Eric is saying is this: it's not about whether the job is like so specialized that it's that you need to have this like super specialized thing. It's about how you frame yourself to the company. If you can frame yourself in a way where where you're positioning yourself as someone who is very specialized in all of the things that the company needs, then that's going to matter a lot, right? So, and everyone can say that they're hardworking. Everyone can say on their application that they're good at working on teams and that they're also good at working individually. Everyone can say those kinds of things. They only get validated in the interview, so they generally are typically not material for your first for your first gating factor. What matters for your gating factor, which is kind of the first gate you have to pass through to even get to prove those things, is going to be something that they don't usually see everyone saying that they're good at, and something also that the company needs. And maybe it's a very specific skill. Like maybe you can look at that company's webpage and see the frameworks they use, and you can say, if the company uses React, you might say, I'm an expert at React and I've used these 5 frameworks, and be super specific, because and maybe that's like the first thing that you say on your resume, and that'll catch someone's eye, because every job seeker is definitely not going to say, I'm really good at React and I know like these 5 frameworks at the top of their resume. And so sometimes it's just a matter of framing yourself as someone who has highly specialized experience for the job. And it might be that the other job seekers have that experience too, but how many of them are going to put it as the top line of their resume? So that's definitely one way to stand out. So thanks for making that point, Eric. I don't know if that's what you were trying to say, but that's definitely what I interpreted. Okay, as a follow-up to my original portfolio question from Megan, if my work is released publicly like an SDK, can I add that to my portfolio even if it's owned by the company? Oh, I mean, if it's public, 100%. Yeah, there's no question about that, because it's public information. And I'm not a lawyer, but so any legal advice that I give comes with a disclaimer that you should never listen to any legal advice that I give. But yeah, there's no way a company's gonna care about that. You should definitely just add it. Okay, so any other questions about life or drafted, or is there anything else that you feel like you missed that you wish you had gotten out of this conversation, or any topics at a high level that you wish that someone was covering that are not covered? So it'd be good feedback for me for next time, or is there any feedback you have for me based on what you saw today? What is the tech stack of drafted? Great question. So we started as a Node and React shop, and we then transitioned our backend to Elixir, which is much better at handling high amounts of web traffic. And we still use React with MobX on the front end. Sorry for people that might be on here that don't know what a lot of these things mean. They're all technical frameworks for front end and back end engineering programming languages. And we use Postgres for our normal relational database, and we use dgraph for our graph database which is a relatively new graph database that was made by some folks out of Google, which we really like. And we're hosted on AWS. We started, our first app was built on Heroku, but then once we got some traction, we switched to AWS to keep our costs down, and because it was more flexible. We'll see what else. We also tried Neo4j for a while for our graph search tech, but then we abandoned it because it wasn't as performant as we wanted. So that, that's just to give you some idea of the stuff we use. Yeah, thanks, Gaurav. Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate to have a team of people that will basically switch our tech stack every time they find something that's better. So the very first version of the drafted mobile app was built on Python and in Python Flask, and today we don't use any Python at all. And our very first, we still use Postgres. Postgres is probably like the one thing that we've used since day one, and we still use it today at scale. But almost every single other thing we've probably swapped out at some point and rewritten a bunch of stuff. We don't use Svelte. Oh man, now you guys are going to make me look bad really soon, and it's going to expose how rusty I am at coding because I'm having to Google some of these things that you're talking about. So it means that whatever we're using is maybe already out of date. Yeah, we don't use Dino. We don't use Dino either. Although we did recently switch a lot of our front end to TypeScript. So like we're in the process of converting our front end to use more TypeScript. No Recoil. Yeah, it's basically I would say 99% is all React MobX with not much else on top of it. Most of the other stuff is custom. And we're not hiring right now, but we might be hiring in 2 months. So in August, we might be hiring. So if by August you're still shopping around, then you have my email. So write it down. And if you want to work on some of these cool things, then that's a great time to ping me because by that time we'll have our new some new financing and stuff going on. So once we do that, we'll be able to hire some more people. Any part-time positions at Drafted? Not right now. We actually do have one person who is doing an unpaid internship at Drafted in marketing. And we would probably be open to taking another unpaid internship in marketing if someone's interested in that. And anyone can email me about that if they're interested as well. But yeah, I mean, it's the 1,000-ish companies that are signed up on the Drafted network is definitely like a great place to start. And for a lot of those companies, it's possible that I might personally know someone. And if you send me a note that is fast, easy, and makes me feel good, then I can help you get introductions to those companies too. What types of roles will be opening in August at Drafted? Most likely, we will be hiring another one more engineer and possibly one more person on customer success. We're a really small company. We're only 10 people right now. And we'd like to keep it that way because we try to essentially hire really slowly and hire really well. And so we're very picky, and but we do hire. I would say maybe half the team that is on our 10-person team today started out as a very inexperienced person on the team, and grew to become a total badass. Thanks for the kind words, Eric. Any feedback that you have or any features, like Gaurav's great suggestion. Let me know. You can let me know and ping me. And I think like we're kind of all done now. So I will let you all go and call it an evening for now. Thank you, Ileana. Follow me on Twitter. You can tweet at me. I'll usually reply when I'm bored in the evenings. That's what I do. So take it easy. Bye, everyone.